Hi. So, what is a privacy enhancing technology? What is a pet? Why do you need them? This presentation is a quick introduction to what pets are and who's even using the term pets. Why are we calling it that? This was originally designed as a keynote for a usable security conference for academics called EURO USEC, and I'm only giving a tiny portion of it today. So, sadly, we're not talking about the lovable, cute, and furry pet. We're talking about privacy-enhancing technology. In particular, this acronym and these three words, privacy-enhancing technology, in that order, all caps. So, as I started looking into this particular term, I discovered that not all pets are considered equal. There are plenty of technologies that enhance privacy, but not all of them are considered privacy-enhancing technologies. Pets are sexy. They're new. They can do a lot. They solve a lot of problems. The other technologies that don't get called a pet are more fundamental. They've been around for a while. They do their job. They're not trivial, but they're not new and sexy. So work is needed on all of these, both the technologies that enhance privacy but aren't sexy enough to be called a pet, and a pet. So why am I making this case that only the sexy technologies get to be called pets? Well, I really started with trying to figure out who's even using this term? Who is talking about privacy enhancing technologies? And I'm going to try and convince you in the next few minutes that it's largely regulators, NGOs, and governments that are using this term, that are using those words. So if you divide the world up into three different types of organizations, you have the public sector on the top line, academics, and then you have industry. And in terms of who's using this privacy enhancing technology term, who's coming out in favor for it, it's largely the public sector. And I'm just going to spend a few minutes giving you some examples to try and convince you that that is the case. So way back in 2007, we already had this communication to the EU Parliament promoting pets. All the rest of my examples are post-2018. Why does that matter? GDPR, EU's largest privacy protection regulation, came out in 2018. And so all these examples are since then. So we also have, for example, the EU Agency for Cybersecurity talking about how you can promote data protection using privacy-enhancing technologies. It's not just the EU. We also have the Information Commissioner Office of the UK, who's talking about privacy-enhancing technologies and how they can help with data protection compliance. And although I'm going to give you a super quick overview of what the privacy-enhancing technologies are, if you want a deep dive, I really recommend this website. I think it's clear and well-written and gives nice examples of the privacy-enhancing technologies. So it's not just Europe. Over in North America, we have the Office of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada, and they're also talking about privacy-enhancing technology. Although they are an outlier, they use this term completely differently than anyone else. They talk about privacy-enhancing technologies as something that a user can choose to install. So something for the end user, maybe a password manager or something that like a VPN or something that I would choose, whereas all the other organizations are talking about pets as something that a company or someone who owns and controls the data set would use to protect their users' privacy. The Federal Trade Commission and NIST also talk a little bit about pets. So those are agencies in the EU. The Federal Trade Commission is largely tasked with privacy, and NIST is in charge of standards and technology and will often have definitions. Intergovernmental organizations like the OECD, they're also talking about the benefits of privacy-enhancing technologies. Not just them, the World Economic Forum is talking about how great privacy-enhancing technologies are. So I know I really only covered North America and Europe and a few intergovernmental organizations, but I hope by this point you're convinced that indeed the public sector is using this term. What about academics? As I said, I originally wrote this presentation for an academic conference, so of course we should ask about how much are academics using this term. And there is an academic conference called Privacy Enhancing Technologies, or PETS. It's a great symposium, can highly recommend it. And there are some papers, if you do a Google Scholar research for this exact term, you will see people using this in the title of their papers. That being said, let's look to where the money is. If you are looking for grants or funding specifically with the term privacy enhancing technology, you're not going to find it, or maybe you will, but I didn't find it. So let me know if I got that wrong. Also, other than privacy enhancing technologies symposium, there aren't many conferences that include that term in their call for papers. So I'm not as convinced that this term is really super hot in academia. What about businesses? What about industry? Well, it's hard to know what's going on inside companies. So this is an outsider perspective. I did my best. And I did more than a Google search. I looked for job descriptions. Didn't really find any job descriptions that had privacy enhancing technology. I didn't really find many product offerings that talked about it. I looked for consulting services that were selling like we can install privacy enhancing technologies for you. Found fewer of those. There are a few blogs, one from Google and a few startups talking about this term. But yeah, I came away from that not being totally convinced that industry is using the term. I believe industry rarely uses the term privacy enhancing technologies. Okay, that's fine. Hopefully I've convinced you public sector is using this term. Well, according to the public sector, what counts as a pet? Well, it'd be really nice if they all defined pet. Not all of them do. This is a subset of the organizations I showed you before that had a definition of privacy enhancing technology. And in fact, FTC or NIST didn't really. And so, great, some of them defined it, but do they agree with each other? And actually, what kind of surprised me is, indeed, they do tend to agree. And in fact, for most of these organizations, privacy enhancing technologies fall into one of three categories. They're either advanced encryption, federated learning, or anonymization. So do these organizations all agree with each other that these are all pets? More or less, they agree. So again, the first row here, EU Parliament did not talk about federated learning. I don't think federated learning was invented back in 2007. Not really sure. They did talk about cookie blockers, which are no one else talked about as a pet. It's not even on this list. And I think that's because by this point, cookie blockers are not new. They're pretty fundamental at this point. And yeah, other than the FTC or NIST, all of them included these three pets in their list of privacy enhancing technologies. So let's just go back to this slide. These pets are a subset of privacy techniques. The three pets that I'm going to talk about are advanced encryption, federated learning, and anonymization. I mentioned that there are technologies that enhance privacy that are not pets. What are they? So, data minimization. This includes not saving data that you don't need, not collecting data unless you need it. Automated data deletion. If you don't need your data for more than 5 years, are you automatically deleting it, or at least like backing it up into some like hard storage under the mountain or something? Data inventory. Do you know where all your data is? This is surprisingly hard for businesses, and you should look into a data inventory system. Access controls. Who can access your treasured user data? This matters not just to prevent insider risk, but it's a good way to help prevent malicious attacks. Also, user control and transparency. What does the user understand about what you're doing? Are you being clear? Are you giving them choices? So those are the pets I really think you should be focusing on. When I work with small and medium businesses, I emphasize figuring out how to implement these first, unless they are a big AI company. Why? Well, let me give you a quick introduction to those three pets. Advanced encryption. So this is not just like SSL, HTTPS. The advanced encryption techniques that were cited as pets were largely homomorphic encryption, secure multi-party computation, and trusted execution environment. And largely, if I'm to sort of oversimplify what these do, is they allow organizations to not necessarily share data sets about users, but to compute and gather insights on shared data sets without learning the details of the individuals, but by and by learning, like in general, for example, an ad company might learn this ad campaign resulted in this many purchases if they do secure multi-party computation with a credit card company. So it's a way to get the insights you need without necessarily getting specific user data and without needing user consent. Federated learning is specifically for machine learning and AI, and the idea is there's a global AI model, and users have their own individual devices that will also be regularly retraining their smaller models and occasionally setting these aggregated information up to the global AI model. And how does this protect user privacy? It means you don't have to share every little detail of what you're doing with the global AI server. You're just sort of sharing broad strokes, but benefiting from AI on your own personalized device. Anonymization. So there were several techniques that the public sector counted as anonymization. Differential privacy, synthetic data, and k-anonymization are some examples. I have a whole another talk on which one of these gives the strongest privacy protections. But a quick explanation of differential privacy comes from the blog cited at the bottom that I can highly recommend if you want to learn more about differential privacy. Basically, the idea is you have a data set with someone and you have that data set without someone. If you apply the differential privacy magic, then at the end you can't really tell the difference between these two data sets. And so the way that offers privacy is that it gives the user some level of deniability about whether they were in that data set or not. Deniability is a concept in privacy that means like you can say with reasonable doubt that, or it's hard to say with like total foolproof accuracy whether someone was doing something or not. So what do these three techniques have in common? So these are all really about big data or machine learning or AI. And if we specifically look at anonymization, secure multi-party computation, and fully homomorphic encryption, these all allow organizations to either share data sets or compute on data sets across an organizational line without needing user consent, because in some way their privacy is protected. So what else do all these pets have in common? They all need some kind of care and feeding. So first of all, do not build your own pet unless you have a team of experts. This is not for small businesses. This is not for your average software engineering team. It's easy to get wrong, and it does require expert implementation. We're working on that. The usability community is working on that, trying to make it better. But for now, don't build your own pet. Also, good luck explaining differential privacy to your uncle. I just gave you a super hand-wavy explanation in a minute. And if you hadn't encountered a lot of those ideas before, you may still be shaking your head. And so I promise your uncle will be thinking the same things. But it's not just your users. It's other people in your organization. You may be trying to convince them that it's that yes, it does indeed. Try and convince a lawyer, try to convince a product manager, marketing people. Yes, it does protect the privacy. It's going to be hard. Also, all of these pets, as I mentioned, are sexy. They have some level of technical sweetness. They are newer. They have a lot of math. They're really interesting. I mean, I personally love differential privacy. So even though I'm saying it's not the right tool for everything, I still think it's really cool. What does it mean if something is interesting for engineers to work on? It means they may actually choose to do it even if it's not exactly the right tool. And the other thing is, in some large engineering organizations, people may get promoted for working on the sexy technology over the fundamental technology. So something like differential privacy may get an engineer a higher paying job or a promotion, whereas working on access controls might not. That means sometimes these pets are selected over the more fundamental technologies. So, we talked about who's using the term pet. I've given you a brief explanation of what they are and what they all have in common. Let's talk about who's actually using them. Who is building a privacy-enhancing technology? I'd like to try and convince you that it's largely industry and not just industry, but big tech. Some examples of regulators and governments. Academics are definitely working on these technologies, but I've seen fewer examples of academics implementing them and making the privacy trade-offs and thinking about all the issues to actually use it to protect user privacy, as opposed to just doing research on it. And again, if I'm wrong, please let me know. So, do I have any data on this? I really only have one piece of data. It's one collection, a list of real-world uses of differential privacy. So, trying to back up my claim just by using differential privacy. And so basically what we have is a few government agencies, like the Israel Ministry of Health and United States Census Bureau, are implementing differential privacy. And big tech is implementing it, like Apple, Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, and Microsoft. So it's almost sort of flipped. Although industry is not talking about privacy-enhancing technologies, they're implementing them, but the regulators and the governments are largely the ones putting out publications about privacy-enhancing technologies. So are those three pets really the right ones to be focused on? Doesn't matter. I mean, the regulators can say what they want about pets. Do we care? Well, data protection officers, privacy lawyers, they pay attention to regulators. That's their job. And the regulators are talking about pets. Just to be clear, the regulators are talking about pets that are for big data sets, enable cross-org collaboration without user consent, easy to get wrong, hard to explain, and technically sweet. So I would like to see more focus on all of the technologies that enhance privacy, not just on the three sexy pets, but on all of them. So I encourage companies and organizations to continue implementing the technologies that enhance privacy: data minimization, automated data deletion, data inventory, access controls, user control, and transparency. Work is needed on the pets too. I am glad that in particular usability researchers might be looking at these pets, and other people are trying to think about how to make them easier to implement. But in our excitement about pets, let's not forget the fundamental techniques. I have more resources. You can go to my blog, sign up for my newsletter, read some different papers on pets, or go to the blog I mentioned.